Please welcome Bettina Arndt.
Thank you, Ken. It was a big shock to me to discover I spoke here in 1980, which makes me feel incredibly old. However, it's a great pleasure to be here. I have spent the last 35 years listening to people talk about their sex lives, even though I spent a lot of time writing about other things. This was, of course, what people wanted to talk to me most about. And the problem I've really heard most about over those years is the problem of mismatched desire, of what I'm calling the other great Australian drought, which is the issue of sex-starved men and reluctant women. So you have this problem of women tending to have lower desire and men being much more likely to retain their interest in sex throughout their relationships. And it creates this very big issue for couples. Because you go to bed every night, you have to face this issue of one person being more interested than the other, this chasm between them, as was nicely illustrated in the Canberra Times today, I thought. I mean, one man talked about this chasm as my own Gulf War. Just this sense that, another one said 6 inches between us in the bed feels like 1,000 miles. And of course it does. I mean, if you're lying there as a woman waiting for the hand to come creeping over, or you're a man who spent the whole day desperately trying to do things the right way, to grovel for sexual favours, it does make you feel very distant from each other. And I had this inspiration of getting some couples to keep diaries for me. I lent on various friends of mine, and they were very sweet enough to actually do it for me. And I realised that this was just a fantastic thing, this business of being able to hear what he says and what she says about any particular sexual encounter. I'd leap out of bed every morning to see my emails, because people would email me at 3 o'clock in the morning, telling them what just happened. But I ended up with just fantastic stories, and which would really illustrate so much about what actually is happening in this negotiation. There was the man, very sad man, who told me that he was just so sick of initiating sex, and he said to his wife, "OK, that's it, I'm not going to initiate sex. The next time we do it, you're going to initiate." That was 8 years ago, and they haven't had sex since. And then I got this letter little note from a man who said, I've been keeping my own diaries for 23 years. Would you like to see them? I mean, I couldn't get there quick enough. He said them to me. What he's been keeping is actually, those year-in-a-page calendars the butchers used to give out, a whole year in one page. And he sent me the little key because the page was covered in green triangles and red squares and green squares. And he sent me the key. So green square means they both had orgasm. Green triangle means he did and she didn't, and so on. So this was all there, 23 years of their sex life. And I just thought, I have to meet these people. And I went to Adelaide and had a whole day with them. An amazing couple. They've spent so much time working to keep their sex life interesting. And they're now in their 60s. She's a librarian. You never pick her if you walk down the street. She's a very good-looking, but not, you wouldn't think she's particularly flamboyant by any means. Lovely body. She keeps herself trim and so on. Every night they have what he calls his UP, which is the underwear parade. And she has a drawer this big full of sexy underwear, those lovely bustier things you see in the windows of sex shops, and wonderful, wonderful, frivolous stuff. And she puts on one of these outfits and the stilettos and the stockings and she spends her evening dressed like that. And he said, I particularly like it when she hangs out the washing or changes the hose. The image of her tottering out there in her stilettos, I just think it's totally adorable.
So does it become a sex education issue?
Certainly it becomes a sex education issue. And it becomes an issue of couples understanding each other more. I mean, that's what I hadn't anticipated. This process of keeping diaries was just magical, and it was so interesting watching couples start to talk who'd never been able to talk about this. There was one woman who was in a car when I was first recruiting people, and she was in the car with her husband listening to me talking about this gap between them. And she said this was our problem, but it was a problem we never talked about, but it was the elephant in the room. And they're listening to me prattling on about this, and he's driving and she's standing there pretending. And they listened to the whole conversation. She came in and ran to the computer and emailed me and said, it was so ghastly listening to this, and we can't talk about it. Now, she wrote for me for months and months and months, and she wrote some wonderful stuff. I'll tell you the best story. She was... she's sexually reluctant, and she talked at length about all the issues that are involved for her and why she doesn't feel like sex. But there was one night she was on eBay bidding for little golden books, you know, little golden books, really old children's books, and she collects them for her grandchildren. And at like 1 o'clock in the morning, she got the book she'd really wanted, and then she went in and left on her husband. And he said, "I'd buy you golden books every day if this happens."
Robert Howden, I want to thank you for what you've had to say today, because I think that for intelligent, caring couples, there are disconnects, and the notion of rejection associated with attempted sexual activity is obviously a significant problem. But I do have a question. That noted sexologist, Billy Connolly, noted that...
Yes, certainly.
Noted that women need to feel that they are loved before they have sex, and men need to have sex before they feel that they are loved. Do you think this is a fundamental disconnect?
Yes, I didn't really go into that, but that's part of the... Women need to feel close to want sex, and men have sex to feel close. There's no question that's part of that whole equation. There was one woman who was talking about the laundry. She was just wonderful, and she talks about the fact that her husband just doesn't help. Well, he helps in his own way, and he does the laundry, but instead of pulling it out of the dryer when it's warm and folding it, which is what she really wants, he just leaves it all on the big pile on the floor, and then the dog lies all over it. When she gets home, there's dog hair covered lumps of concrete. And she gets furious about that. Why can't he do it? But then he says to her, "Look, you know, if we had $1 million and we had a housekeeper and you didn't have to do anything, you still wouldn't want sex." And she said, "I deny and deny and deny, but deep down I know he's right."